Hello, and welcome to the second of two listening sessions about the budget for the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. If you heard that earlier, bear with me. I just want to give folks a little bit of time to join. My name is Rosie, and I'll be moving us through tonight's call. So tonight, we'll start with a short presentation from the SFMTA's budget team, so you can all know more about what's informing this budget. Then we'll move to hearing your comments. If you have a comment, we would love to get you into the queue. And if you're calling, the best way you can do that is you can press *3 on your phone. And if you're streaming or watching online, you can also just enter your comment into the field below the feed. Once you do that, a team member will take you off the main call. And if you had put it online, we will read it and take note of it, and if you are on the phone, you'll talk to one of the members of our team. And some callers will be selected to share their comments on air. We may not get to everybody, but we want to make sure that we get as many comments as we can. And I think, as I said before, if you're listening via the video stream, you can use the field below the streaming player. Please note, we might not be able to get to everyone's comments on air tonight, but we want you to know that every single comment is shared with staff and will be recorded and reviewed. And we'll try to cover as many topics as possible. Also, while all perspectives are encouraged, we do ask that everyone be respectful, curious, and keep your comments under 2 minutes or so. Also, please refrain from comments focused on any individuals. With that, we have Jared Weiner from SFMTA's Budget Office, who will give us a short overview. This meeting is designed to work for those without digital access, and so while there is a slide presentation along with Jared's presentation, everything on screen will be summarized verbally. If you wish to see the presentation and you have a computer access, you can start viewing. If you're not already, at bit.ly/SFMTA listen. So with that, Jared, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosie. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening in today. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the financial situation of the agency before COVID, the impacts of COVID, and some background information on kind of how we're structuring and thinking about the budget for this next FY 23-24 period. We'd really like to. The big purpose of this is to really get your feedback and your ideas and your priorities for how we allocate our funds in the next fiscal budget cycle. So with that, next slide. So we know over the past 20 years, the SFMTA and the services we provide, the demands for the services we provide have increased over the past 20 years. And, we're an interesting organization, the fact that we're a transit agency and a DOT. And before COVID, we were facing a structural deficit, which means our ongoing expenses were beginning and continued to kind of outpace our revenue sources that we use to support the agency. Next slide. That was before the pandemic. But the pandemic really made some of these systematic budget issues facing the agency worse. So next slide. So here you can see our two main sources of revenue. So we have our transit fares and our parking revenue. And as you can see, up until the pandemic, our fares took a huge hit. Our parking revenues took a huge hit. Our parking revenues are about 20% of what they used to be. And we can see throughout the pandemic, the different spikes when different variants came up. But really these, we're at about 20% of where we were pre-pandemic. You can see parking revenues have rebounded a little bit, but fare transit revenues have really lagged behind. And so this is a big issue for the agency moving forward. Next slide. And we also know in San Francisco, the pace of recovery is a lot slower than we would like. We know that even compared to other municipalities, San Francisco really lags behind. This graph shows the number of days typical employees will come to the workplace. So really, even just the core pattern that our usage of our system has changed. And looking forward, we can really tell that with remote work, with partial work days, the use of our system will change pretty significantly and maybe permanently moving forward. Next slide. So two of our three main revenue sources took a big hit during the pandemic. That third source of revenue is transfers that we get from the city's general fund to kind of cover the gaps in what we're missing from the other two revenue sources. But what was a big help was really the one-time federal relief fund. So we received over $1 billion in federal relief, and really what that helped us do is keep the agency running and operating, keeping service on the street. We did reduce to a core network, but really the whole goal of that was to avoid layoffs, maintain core services, and really make sure that we were matching the pace of the city and the recovery of the city. We wanted to give ourselves as much runway so that we could remain, resourced and stable. And so that's kind of how we've been slowly using our federal funds. But these are one-time funds. Some things that helped us through the pandemic, kind of two unexpected revenues. The San Francisco General Fund ended up performing better than we had anticipated. So there was a surplus there. And then also the San Francisco Employee Pension Fund performed really well during the kind of the stock bump that happened during the pandemic. And this reduced the agency's costs related to pension contributions. So that really helped our balance sheet, but there's still challenges that we face. Next slide. So this brings us to kind of our current budget development process for FY 23-24. Next slide. So this is just kind of gives you an overview of our timeline for the budget development. Back in January, we kind of started the whole process with a workshop with our board of directors, which is archived online, and you can take a look at it. And we started the development of our capital improvement program, which is our infrastructure and 5-year capital outlook for the agency. And now we're kind of in the session where we want to really hear back from the public about what is important to them, where we should put services, where we should put our resources, so that we can start to make some of those choices off of what services we provide with the limited kind of revenue that we have it available. The ultimate goal here is to submit a final budget to the mayor's office by May 1st, and so that's kind of our timeline. Next slide. The SFMTA also recently updated our strategic values for the agency. We always say that a budget is a reflection of our values. And so what we have here in our updated kind of strategic values are a set that both deals with internally how we do business and what we want for the transportation system kind of externally. So values for the workplace are respect, inclusivity, integrity. Values for the transportation system is to promote economic vitality in the system, support the environmental stewardship and goals of the entire city, and then kind of doing this all around rooted in equity and trust and transparency. Next slide. So last spring, we did a survey with San Francisco residents, and we actually have another survey out now, which you can go to through our website. But last spring, just getting a sense of where people's main priorities were, these were the following kind of themes that popped up from that survey. Equity, making sure our resources were distributed equitably across the city and across services. Fast and convenient transit, more repairs and maintenance, and then, of course, improving safety and access. One thing that kind of surprised us from this survey was a majority of residents really wanted us to focus on the core service, the service that we already have, focus on our infrastructure, make the stuff we have work better. So that is something that we've heard and we've really decided to kind of focus on moving forward. Next slide. So as an enterprise agency, the SFMTA has to submit a balanced budget. And before we start considering new services or new things that we want to provide, we have to kind of develop a baseline budget. So this was developed with the city controller's office, and what we look at is we look at our base level revenue projections and our base level operating expenditures. So the pie chart on the left really shows that breakdown of where our sources of funding kind of come from and what we're anticipating to get. So you can see transit fares and parking fees and fines make up about 30% of our total revenue. Before the pandemic, those two sources made up about 60% of our revenue. So the difference really has been made up by both increases from transfers from the general fund and that federal relief. One thing that we're always looking for is really local sources so that we can come after federal grants or state grants that are coming up, like you hear about the infrastructure bill. It's important to realize that all of those funds are competitive grants that SFMTA has to compete for, and most of those grants require a pretty sizable local match. So local monies are really important for us to leverage and get some of those larger grant sources. On the right-hand side, you can see our operating budget expenditures. We have our non-labor and our salaries and fringe. And again, these are those ongoing costs that continue to kind of grow and outpace our revenue. And that's, due to, cost of living adjustments and things like that. Next slide, please. So just another look at kind of the operating budget, which again is our ongoing costs. So we do have a couple potential new revenue sources that the agency is looking at. So things that would have to go to the ballot, we're looking at a transportation special tax, possibly a look at the parking tax. And then, the mayor and the board of supervisors have supported us going for a general obligation bond. That'll be on the ballot June of 2022. That is a $400 million general obligation bond, which is used basically to fund capital projects, infrastructure projects, kind of one-time things. And the types of projects that we're looking at, again, we're hearing from our survey, focus on the core system. So we're really working on the state of good repair improvements, updating our facilities, updating our fleet and our rail, and making sure that our older pieces of infrastructure, which really impact the reliability of the system and also just become costlier to maintain as they age, that we're addressing those and replacing those. And so those dollars are really important. The general obligation bond is also important too, because it also, it's a local source, which helps us provide more match for those federal grants so that we can get those additional federal dollars. So that's really important. Other new revenue sources, again, looking at federal grants, state grants, and then even looking at how we can use the development of SFMTA properties and using the revenue or profit generated from that to fund transit. And we're not looking for like a one-time thing. We're looking for ongoing revenues to support the system. That's kind of the key thing that is really what we're focused on. Next slide. So again, this is just another look at our operating budget. Right now there are unknowns with this. One is we don't know the impacts of our labor negotiations, which are going on now, which could impact those ongoing costs that the agency has to deal with. And then we've seen little bits of impact of inflation, difficulty getting materials and high labor costs in our contracts, which is a challenge to delivering capital projects. Next slide, please. So this graph kind of shows that baseline budget and the impacts over time. And so this in blue, it assumes that we don't get any revenue measures, and then the other two scenarios are if we receive or get some additional revenue moving forward. But as you can see, there is that kind of steady decline, and really that goes into that structural deficit that we had before COVID, and really highlights the importance of finding new revenue sources, but new revenue sources that are not one time, that are ongoing and can grow with the agency and grow with the additional services that we want to provide San Francisco. So it's really about trying to make the agency, sustainable and reliable. Next slide. So now's the part in the presentation where we really just get to hear from you and hear your priorities, your ideas. So with that, I will hand it back over to Rosie, and we can start taking calls. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared. We really appreciate that background. And now, listeners or viewers, we are ready to start the listening segment, and we want to hear what you're thinking. We're going to offer 3 prompts over the course of the remaining session that we're here tonight. And as we shared, we might not get to everyone, but we are going to focus on taking as many calls as we can to get your comments and hear as many perspectives as possible shared here. So before I jump into that, I do want to just address a couple of things that have come in online, a little housekeeping. In terms of Q&A tonight, as I think you've already heard, we are taking comments and questions, and if you are calling in, we can take you live. In terms of participants, we have around 36 people for this evening. And of course, when we're done and wrapped tonight, there will be the presentation and information posted online, which I think is one of the other questions. Yes, tonight's presentation on the budget will be posted on the website. Another one that I'm seeing is not necessarily in SFMTA's purview, but it is, why isn't there a redistricting meeting tonight? And to that, I just want to say that redistricting is a very important opportunity for public participation and truly a hallmark of our democracy, and so incredibly important to the residents of San Francisco. I can't speak to why or when, but according to the task force website, the next meeting is on March 5th, and you can find out more online, or if you'd like to email the members, you can do so at RDTF, which is Redistricting Task Force, at sfgov.org. By all means, please get involved, and happy to support you in any way that we can do that. All right, so moving on, we do have some questions we can address in a little bit, but I'd like to go back to the prompts first, and because we really want to hear what you think. So our first prompt right now is, where should the agency focus its spending over the next 2 years? And in terms of examples, it could be safer streets, transit service, vehicle maintenance, but we're really looking to hear your comments and hear your priorities. And as I mentioned before, or if you're just joining us now, if you're on the phone, you can press *3 to share your comment and be routed to one of our team so that we can bring you live. And if you're listening on the live stream, please use the field below the streaming player. Once again, the prompt is, where should the agency, SFMTA, focus its spending over the next 2 years? If y'all are only watching online, I would suggest you call in because you could be on this program. I'd be happy to take your comment live. Once again, if you'd like to call in, and have a comment, please hit *3 on your phone, and you can also enter that comment into the field under the live feed. It looks like we do have a comment on the latest Muni customer survey from Lizette. Says it's poorly designed and that you won't capture any data with true statistical significance, that there are too many false dichotomies built into the survey design. Jared, is that something you're able to speak to?
Yeah, we can make sure we'll take that comment back to our comms team to take a look at the survey. Yep.
All right, as I mentioned, if you have dialed in, you can press *3, and if you haven't dialed in yet and you'd like to, you can still watch online, but also call 833-362-1164 if you'd like to participate on the phone and make a comment that we can bring live. And pardon me, I'm catching up. One of the comments that we have is that current infrastructure, such as the Powell Street Promenade located in Union Square, is outdated and needs to be replaced or removed. So in answering the question, that's one of the ways the agency should focus their spending over the next 2 years. Thank you for that comment. Another one that we have from Ramon is no fare increase on all payment options. We also have from Tom Radulovich, establishing pedestrian, cycling, and transit priority on more streets. Another one we have is a thank you for restoring funding with the paratransit system.
Question about
looking through this. Jump on in, Jared.
Okay, so so I see a question from Mark about what kind of fare increases are on the table. So when I showed that baseline revenue projection, that does include indexing fares, which we put on hold during the pandemic. What that baseline revenue projection doesn't include is expanding like weekend or evening meters. And so that's going to be a policy discussion that I believe is on the table for our next MTAB board meeting. So if you have a thought or input on that decision, definitely make sure you're calling in or submitting your feedback on that to the board members.
Right. Thank you for that, Jared. And we're going to move on to another prompt soon. But one of the questions I think it's worth answering for sure is the budget based on all services restored to pre-pandemic levels?
Yeah, so on the expenditure side, on the baseline budget, it it assumes that we are restoring the staffing levels that were frozen during the pandemic, and getting back up to pre-pandemic staffing levels.
Great, thank you for that. So I think we do have some folks calling in, and if you are still waiting to make your comment, please put it into the field under the live stream. And also please do call in if you're interested in going live. As I said before, the phone number to do that is 833-362-1164. And you can dial 3 at any time to be routed to a member of our team.
And then Rosie, I see another question asking about does the budget, where did it go? Yeah, how does the budget address staffing challenges due to COVID, leaves, resignations, retirements, and other reasons? So when we do project our both on the revenue side and expenditure side, we do factor in some level of attrition and retirements, and even just the impacts during COVID. One thing that is included in our baseline expenditures is an increase to our HR division. You've heard that we've had challenges trying to hire staff in a timely manner and to get people on board, and so that dedicated funding increase to that division is included in our baseline expenditure assumptions. So thank you for that question.
All right, and bear with me, I'm writing down a few different things. Here's one from Dennis. And, says, not sure if this is a question, but why are elevators / escalators at Civic Center and Embarcadero always breaking down?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's partially due to use, and again, like as we staff up and really focus on our operating and maintenance staff, that we should hopefully address that in the next budget cycle. Yeah. But definitely, if sorry, definitely if there are issues, folks know to use 311 to report when things are down, elevators are down, or just even any issues that you see with service, signals, vehicles. Use the 311 app to really help us notify when things are not as they should be.
Okay, an answer to the prompt that we gave earlier, and where should the agency focus spending over the next 2 years? Sorry, I lost my place. I'm so sorry. But we also have a comment that says to enforce parking meters on Sundays and evenings where parking demand is high. And also, I see some comments from folks who are watching online. You can call in on the phone to participate and go on air. The phone number, once again, is 833-362-1164. And you can press *3 to be routed to a member of our team. Once again, that phone number for calling in is 833-362. Sorry, 362-1164. Another comment that we've received is that we would like to see funds to Vision Zero projects be increased since we are unlikely to achieve our goal of 0 fatalities if we don't invest in the safety measures known to save lives.
So, I mentioned our Geo Bond program. A good portion of that Geo Bond funds is set for kind of street improvements and corridor safety improvements. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, the SFCTA with our Prop K sales tax funds just approved or finalized their expenditure plan for the reauthorization of Prop K funds. That will be on the ballot November 2022. So those will both really help us, get resources and allocate them to Vision Zero type projects.
Another question. When is SFMTA going to restore pre-pandemic service? We are looking to take comments, but I do want to answer this one if we can. And there's a question about increasing fares and how that relates to service.
So, as we've stated in kind of previous meetings, there's 2 challenges to restoring service. It's a staffing issue. That's one. So that's where we're trying to address that, so we can hire and make sure we have the full staff to provide pre-pandemic service. And as we go into this next budget cycle, we are assuming full positions back that were frozen during the last 2 years. So if we can fill them, we will fill them. And so that will, we're aiming to get the agency back to pre-pandemic levels.
Great, thank you for that. I'd like to move on to the next prompt. We're still taking your comments, and they will be noted. And especially if you're able to call in, we would love to hear from you. Once again, if you would like to join by phone, the number is 833-362-1164, and you can press *3 at any time to be routed to a member of our team. Once more, it's 833-362-1164, and you press *3 to be routed to a member of our team. As more comments come in, I do want to move on to the next prompt, and we may be able to go back and address more, and they certainly will be recorded regardless. But for our next prompt, what we'd like to know is, over the course of the pandemic, SFMTA has instituted or fast-tracked several programs and initiatives. Some of these I'm sure you're familiar with, including shared spaces, temporary emergency transit lanes, closed streets, essential strip cards, free muni for all use, street safety quick builds. And what we'd like to know is, of all these things, which of these should we prioritize keeping? And again, I'll say, the question is, over the course of the pandemic, the SFMTA has instituted or fast-tracked several programs and initiatives, such as shared spaces, temporary emergency transit lanes, closed streets, essential trips cards, free muni for all use, and street safety quick builds. So we would love to hear from you. Which of these should we prioritize keeping? Again, if you're on the phone, you can press *3 to tell us if you have a comment and be routed to a member of our team. And if you're listening on the live stream, please put your comments in the field below. All right, one comment that has come in so far is developing SFMTA properties should focus first on downtown parking garages. A number of them, and developing downtown properties will bring in revenue ridership and reduce congestion, pollution, and traffic deaths. Right, it looks like we have a caller on the phone, and I'm very excited. Jaime, I'm going to bring you live about your comment about the budget and service. So Jamie, give us a couple of seconds, and you will be going on right about now.
Hey, thank you for having this. So I know that this is kind of confusing, having another way to do this, but really, it's really more around a comment around the budget, and also partly because of the survey that we're being asked. It was mentioned that in the previous survey, people said, let's improve the system we have. And so I'm wondering, can we have a budget where it shows 100% service, pre-pandemic levels, also where we don't have to choose between coverage and reliability and frequency, which is what the survey is asking us to do. So one, I think it would be helpful to know how much would it really cost to get to that, right? And I know revenues are limited, but at least for us, ridership, we want to know how much it costs to get to that, what we all want. And then on the other part, the survey in itself, and I think I mentioned this to some of y'all when you attended the TL meeting, is like, it seems like it's inherently unequitable, just because you are making people to choose priorities, and the folks that needs that equitable service most likely will lose out on this one, right? A great example is the coverage versus reliability and frequency. Somebody commented one of our meetings, like, this person is a senior. It's hard for her to stand up for long periods of time. So either way she picks, she's still going to end up having to, deal with it. And so that's why I'm really, wanting that question shouldn't be asked, but really making all part of the budget. So that's really more of like a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for that comment.
And I think that's the
sorry, Jared.
I think that's the challenging thing here that we're trying to do is, we want to do all of the things, but even post pandemic, even with the slow economic recovery, our revenues are constrained and really constrained, and so even though we'd like to really do everything and provide both of those things, we can't, and so that's kind of the purpose of the survey, is just to get us at least to figure out what end of the scales. But understanding, yes, there are going to be people who kind of, depending which way it falls, there will be difficulties. So totally acknowledge that and appreciate the comment.
Great, thank you. A couple other comments we have coming in are in terms of priorities for funding and what to keep. We have keep and extend all of them. And also, don't tell us you can't afford it all. Tell us how much it costs and let us advocate for them. Thank you. That's helpful. That's a helpful comment. And
yeah, so
that we also go ahead.
Yeah, so if folks want to get an understanding of like kind of the full universe of needs, if you go to the SFMTA's T2050, that might be the website, or if you just Google it or search on our MTA website, or we can get that link to you. But we did a full kind of analysis of kind of the full universe of needs that we've heard and we've been working on, and we have put a price tag to it. And so that those materials are available for folks to dig through and kind of look through. And if there are elements of that report or that plan that you like or you think are really things that we should focus on, that's kind of what we want to hear, because we know, So if you're looking for a little bit more concrete, like what are the costs associated with certain things, check out our T2050 report.
Thanks, Jared. Just kind of echoing that last comment, we have another one that says that that's understood, but it would be good to know how much it will take to have everything writers want and to give us an idea of how much that will cost. Additionally, we also have another comment in terms of what we should keep and what we should prioritize. And Eric wrote quick builds and Muni free for all. I also have another caller on the line, David. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about this meeting. So I'm going to bring you live in just a second. All right, David, you're on.
Hey, David.
All right, David, if you're on, we can't hear you. All right, so I'm going to take this off live, but please reroute to a member of our team or dial back in so that we can take your comments live. All right. So once again, I'd love to just remind folks of the question that we would love to hear comments on, which is over the course of the pandemic, SFMTA has instituted or fast-tracked several programs and initiatives, including shared spaces, temporary emergency transit lanes, flow streets, essential trips cards, free Muni for all use, street safety quick builds. Once again, which of these should we prioritize keeping? If you're calling in on the phone, you can press *3 at any time to be routed to a member of our team and share your comment. And if you are listening on the live stream, please use the field below the streaming player. Also, I do want to pause for a second, Jared, because we would also love to hear a little bit about Connect SF and how that comes into play with these priorities and plans for the future and for budgeting.
Yeah, so Connect SF really addresses our long kind of medium to long range plans for the transit system and the streets. And so in that program, they're looking at things like expanding the rail network, focusing on our core system, and so a lot of as that program develops and those projects kind of start to get more details behind them, we bring those numbers or that need into our long-range capital plan, our 20-year capital plan, and that becomes a capital need for the agency. And then we kind of split those needs up by our different capital portfolios, such as facilities, fleet, fixed guideway, and then those as those kind of we understand the full need for 20 years for the agency. We look at that when we start developing our 5-year. That's a revenue constrained infrastructure plan. So the capital improvement program, really, which we will not only, I guess, by May, we're going to be adopting our 2-year budget, but we'll be adopting our 5-year capital plan. And so that's where we will really outline 5 years, the next 5 years of infrastructure development. But all of those kind of long range plans and projects and ideas really get factored into our 20-year capital plan. And if folks want to kind of take a look at like our last CIP or even our last budget, just to kind of see what content is in there, I would encourage folks to go to sfmta.com/investor relations. And you can see our 2-year consolidated budget for the last cycle. And you can see our last 5-year CIP to really get a sense of the level of detail and projects and funding sources even that we use to operate the agency. So it's a great resource. Yep.
Thanks, Jared. I do think this response gets to questions about how we plan to fund some long-range rail expansions, which are LRB. Moving on to some of our other comments. One of the comments we just had come in is that we should be prioritizing all of the things that we named earlier based on equity, priority, community needs. All right, as we move on, I just want to say thank you to everyone for all of your comments. And I do want to reiterate that if we didn't get to everyone, please know that all the comments are written down and are equally important for us to hear and will be documented and shared with the agency. Now we have our final prompt of the evening, which is going to be about new revenue to expand services. So what we'd like to hear from you are, what are your ideas for raising revenue to accomplish all that today's participants have shown support for? We're really interested in your ideas for how we can get more resources to better serve you. As you know, if you're on the phone, you can press *3 at any time to let us know if you have a comment. We can bring you on. And if you're listening on a live stream, please use the field below the streaming player. If you're not already on the phone and you'd like to dial in, you can catch us at 833-362-1164. As we said, dial *3 at any time, as well as enter your comments into the chat below the streaming player. Again, and I know this is a difficult question, I think, but we'd love to hear what your ideas are for raising revenue to accomplish all that today's participants have shown support for in the last section. For example, something we've heard before and would love to hear your comments are, is to enforce parking meters on Sundays and evenings, which has already been commented. There's a potential revenue source. If people have support or feelings about that, we'd love to hear that. Once again, if you're following online, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's in that previous slide, and even when I started off the presentation, SFMTA is kind of it's a unique agency that we are a transit service and kind of a streets DOT function. And on that second slide or third slide that I shared with our revenue sources, parking fees and fines and fare revenue are our two largest sources. Parking, as a revenue source, supports our transit service, and so it's tough. We don't want to kind of pin people against each other, but there's we're challenged by trying to find those ongoing revenue sources to really help support both transit and our streets functions, because it's kind of we get funds from two sources, and they kind of support two major services, but they've shared. So.
Thanks, Jared. We do have a couple other comments coming in. about how to increase revenue. One is to increase the residential parking permit fees to cover more of the cost of storing cars in the public right-of-way. And another one we have is to increase fees and charges for delivery corporations to operate in the city. And I want to circle back to some of our earlier comments that aren't about revenue, but I do want to address them. Patricia has asked, what has SFMTA done to encourage drivers to buy electric vehicles?
I am not aware of a program for that. I know we have supported getting taxis to move to greener vehicles. That's a good question though, and I can follow up on that.
Great, thank you. All right, so I want to circle back one more time on the last prompt of the evening, which is what are your ideas for raising revenue to accomplish all of these goals and programs that have been supported? And please press *3 if you're calling in and enter your comments into the field under the live stream. And I want to thank Dennis, who commented, thank you for all you do with this, and that he's a happy camper. So we appreciate that. And we hope that everyone's going to have a happy and lovely evening. We'll give it a little bit longer if anybody has anything else to add. We really appreciate your time tonight, and we're thankful for you taking time from your evening to be here with us and share your thoughts. So to wrap up tonight's listening session, the next step in this process is that we'll sift through all the comments we've heard and conduct a report out at the town hall, which is scheduled for Thursday, March 10th. Details for that session will be posted on our website shortly. Also, if you want to follow up with staff, please feel free to email budget@sfmta.com, or you can call 415-646-4785. Once again, if you'd like to follow up with staff, the email is budget@sfmta.com, or you can call phone number, which is 415-646-4785. Thank you all so much for spending your evening with us. I hope you have a wonderful night and a great week.
Thank you so much. Thanks.